It's working. It's working, and there's a hub off. Listen to all the networking happening. How cool is this?
Hello everybody, and welcome to what was to be the final version of Brisbane Women in Blockchain for the year. However, we just couldn't help it and we've scheduled another session for next week. But I'll let Katrina talk about that one later because it's quite an exciting one, as is today's. First of all, before we start off, I of course would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're gathered on today and their elders past, present and future. Got a very interesting topic here today, and we have two female co-founders of startups in Brisbane. So we have Tracey in her capacity as co-founder of Axalon, which is a Brisbane startup looking broadly at artificial intelligence. And we have Katrina Donaghy, who is also a co-founder of a Brisbane startup looking at blockchain technology. So both quite exciting emerging technologies in their own right, but when you put them together, it certainly brings a whole other new level of opportunities and possibly risks, which we'd like to explore a bit today. I'm going to start off by being a little bit provocative, and I'm going to read a quote. It's not too bad. These two quotes are actually, and I won't say who, but they're written by the government, the Australian government somewhere. Not Queensland. It's not Queensland. Okay. So the first quote is about AI. The challenges and opportunities presented by this cognitive revolution is arguably one of the greatest strategic issues facing Australia. So in addition to the threat of job losses, disruption to markets, there are many issues of concern, including accountability, which will be intensified. And I've got another quote from another government authority. Well, blockchain is well worth being observed, but without standardisation and a lot of work to come, for every use of blockchain, there's a better technology alternative.
You were practicing for politics. Definitely got the voice down.
I just have to say that is an amazing amount of word salad. That's my word salad for the day. Thank you very much.
Okay, so first of all, it's the end of the year, there's a lot of social functions around. I've been attending a lot of barbecues myself. A lot of people from all walks of life. And I was wondering if you ladies could help me out here with what to say at social gatherings when I get the inevitable comments. So I'm going to start off with Tracey. So, AI. Isn't that some sort of human-like supercomputer thing that's going to become smarter than us and take over the world?
It is if you listen to the media. Yeah, so, AI, what is AI? And it is worth demystifying this, right? So the whole purpose of what we're doing today is about demystification so that everyone can actually engage in these conversations and we can have rational, adult, human conversations about these technologies. So AI is any kind of technology that can sense, it can analyse, and it can act, right? So that's everything from sensing IoT, bringing in more data, motion sensors, all sorts of sensing technologies that are around us all the time now. The processing side is what most people tend to fixate on when they talk about AI, which is that machine learning, the deep learning, the computers that teach themselves how to play games like Go in a fixed environment. and then the acting is the robot side of things. So AI is robotics more, right? So AI is a fairly broad terminology that's been around since the 60s. And because we call it artificial intelligence, it gets conflated a lot with human intelligence, right? So we've personified this technology. And there seems to be a tendency of people to go down that apocalyptic path of, well, if it's like humans, then it's going to behave like humans. Therefore, at some point in time, it's going to want to become dominant to us and subjugate us humans to its AI will. The reality is it doesn't have that kind of consciousness, right, or conscious intent. That's something that the media likes to jump on because it's sensationalist, right? It's interesting, it's Skynet, it makes it sound more interesting than it actually is. And if you talk to anyone who works in AI, it's not very interesting. It's quite hard work.
Okay, so can I just follow up that question? What is the actual state of the AI space at the moment? Where is it actually at?
On its innovation curve. Well, I would say it's further up the hype cycle. It's coming down into, if you want to look at Gartner hype cycles, like it's coming down into its...
So we're ahead.
Yeah. Oh, we're...
No, you're behind.
No, we're ahead.
No, because we're in...
We totally were. This
is not a competition.
No, it's been through the hype cycle, I think, and we are seeing a lot of commoditized IT that's happening now. So IDC, which is like a global research company, have indicated that 85% of companies are actually using AI in some form at the moment. A show of hands of people in the room, like, are you working for a company that's actually using any kind of AI technology? Okay. And a show of hands of who's using a blockchain type technology? Oh my God, you're winning. But so there is broad adoption that's happening in the market. The majority of that adoption is around what we're calling commoditized AI or machine learning. So that's around natural language processing, and you see that a lot with bots or speech to text. Hey Google, what's the weather like outside? That's machine learning. And the other big area that we're seeing it is in predictive analytics. Customers who bought this also bought that. And they're the sort of like low bars to entry, but super high value for a lot of organisations. So that's where it's starting at the moment. And there's an awful lot of money being thrown at AI in terms of developing up these models by technology companies, right? Like we're talking tens of millions of dollars, hundreds probably, around other forms of machine learning as well.
Thanks, Trace.
That's okay.
So there's nothing to be scared of?
Well, I think that we're starting to see a conversation around ethics in AI. Now there are AI models out there, machine learning models out there that do teach themselves. There's AI that creates AI, and so one of the benefits to coming to meetups is I just met someone before this meetup, and she explained to me in the back row the concept of evolutionary AI, and I hadn't actually heard that specific term used before, but it's effectively AI that teaches itself AI. And we demonstrated this actually last week in this very room at the Google Cloud meetup. There's a thing called auto machine learning. So the Google platform has this currently, where you can actually train models for image recognition. So those models are out there. The thing that you've got to think about though is what is the source of your data? So how do you control what the data input is into a machine learning model? Because by the time you get through into these concepts of deep learning, which is like multiple different layers of machine learning, if you start with bad data, you end up with, exactly, or models that are what's called inscrutable. So you can't actually trace back to see how that model got to that decision. So you may actually get something that's like a 99% accuracy, but you might do something like, change the positioning of that chair in the room, and all of a sudden it's not accurate anymore because you don't understand the logic to how that machine learning or that deep learning model came up with its actual calculations. So there is a real need to be able to provide traceability, or let's call it data provenance, right? which is an area where blockchain solutions could actually help, because blockchain is a governance technology.
It's a governance technology. Oh, do you want to say
Thanks,
something?
Tracey. I'm going to pass over to Katrina now. Now,
Thanks, Trace. That's okay.
this blockchain stuff, isn't that all associated with that cryptocurrency scam stuff?
Were you at my last presentation, were you? Yes, so it often is conflated, the two are conflated together. I think there's two sides to the conversation when it comes to BC and crypto. I think we have to acknowledge that the two are necessary for each other, especially as we're moving into a lot more token economics. But I think it's also respecting them both about what their roles are and what the role of blockchain is and what cryptocurrency is.
But, you know, if Facebook are banning it and the banks are closing people's banks accounts for buying crypto, and the government isn't real impressed because it can't be controlled, then, you know, what value does blockchain have?
I guess it depends on what you're actually looking at. Like, we were having this conversation this morning, the idea that of enterprise blockchain are much more interested in the commissioned and private blockchains. And I think if we're having conversations around enterprise blockchain, we wouldn't be actually worried about these type of things. I think it's more about the focus is on public and permissionless blockchains, which seem to scare people.
So, Katrina, when I'm at an extended family barbecue this Christmas, how do I explain what blockchain is?
You tell them what your job is.
Don't tell me to read white papers or about hashes. What is it in real terms? What is it? What's so good about it?
Okay, if I was to define it, and this is very, very easy to define, I think everyone knows this in the room, it's a decentralized database that shows the registry of assets and transactions in a peer-to-peer network. Yeah, I know we hear all of that all the time. But I think the value proposition of blockchain is what Tracey was alluding to. It gives us verification of where our data comes from. And based on the governance and the ethics that sits behind it, we're able to then start to trust what that data is projecting for us to do some really interesting things with. I know that's why you just don't tell people at barbecues what you do, because they just don't understand. So you just tell them that you're in software development.
And so, Katrina, how would you describe the actual state of play of blockchain development at the moment?
The short version is saying that it's in the trough of disillusionment. So therefore, 2018 has been a major disappointment for the expectations that we were going to see developed blockchains. And it's a bit disturbing, because for those who do work in the industry, who are working really hard to build the highways, it's not really fair to say that, because technically this blockchain has been really active for 3 or 4 years. And when you think about the building of the internet, which has still been ongoing for 25, I think people just got high expectations that need to have a bit of reality check. And we haven't helped ourselves in the industry because of the hype and the various nefarious actors that have been monetising themselves. So it's been very challenging to push that aside as you're trying to get on with the business of blockchain.
I have heard you speak about the value proposition of blockchain, and especially in the context of changing the paradigm for really wicked problems in our world.
I think what I talk about, and it's something that is probably close to my heart because of who I am as a person, but we have common resources, common shared resources in the community, whether they be water, natural resources, real estate, various things that are becoming very finite. And we're not looking after them very well. We just are not, and I think it gets back to the idea of the tragedy of commons, and I'm a social scientist by trade, so the idea of a social scientist like me being immersed in this technology, people go, how do you do that? And I said, well, at the end of the day, technology is supposed to resonate with humans. And if you're not having a social science conversation around this technology, then I think we have a problem. I think the idea of being able to balance out self-interest for common good is something that resonates with us as a company, Civic Ledger, and hence why we're very pin-focused on how do we actually create much more transparency and accountability of shared assets such as water in this country.
Cool, thanks for that. Back to Tracey. I want to move on and have a little discussion about the cost of trust and the societal impacts of the cost of trust and what the possible future state might be. So when we consider the possibility of merging, there's such a lack of control over this. So I'd be really interested to hear what you think the value proposition is of merging these two technologies together, and what sort of positive social impacts that can bring.
Okay, so I guess firstly, no technology exists in isolation. So you can't just go out and buy an AI, or you can't just go out and buy a blockchain, right? It's so, and often with technologies get talked about as though they're completely distinct things, but for anyone who's ever worked in IT, if you actually have a look at any kind of solution, it's a very layered sort of stack of different technologies. So AI has been very much enabled by cloud computing, which has been enabled by the internet. Blockchain, very, very similar as well, right? These technologies would not exist today without cloud computing and without the virtually infinite storage and compute and processing power that's available. So they're kind of co-evolving, I would say. I think because both terms are so hyped, right? So things get cloud washed, things get AI washed, things get blockchain washed, when maybe they're not really like that anyway. If you have a look at some of the companies that are out there, like blockchain companies are already using AI. There's a startup that is in China who are actually using AI that is generated by the proof of work mining, right? So, so
it's a really important story.
Cool. So to take so there are consensus mechanisms in blockchain. There are many different ways that you can reach consensus, right? So if everyone in the room was to vote on something and we wanted to validate it, we could use different consensus models, right? So one of them that's quite controversial is proof of work. And the reason it's controversial is because it uses up so much energy, because effectively what you're doing is you're racing to solve algorithmic puzzles, to be the first one to solve it so that you get the right to write the next block on the blockchain, because the blockchain is just a chain of blocks, right? One block after the other. So proof of work, then you're solving specific algorithms, and there is a company in China who are with the people who are running the nodes, they're actually running medical research algorithms on top, right? So they are using the proof of work or the energy that's created anyway, and they're saying instead of just using it to do this this proof of work and this validation, we can actually use it to support medical research. So that's layering AI on top of blockchain. That's how blockchain can help AI. But if you want to have a look at sort of converging them and where they actually can help each other out, I think that the governance conversation is a really, really good one. And I liked the story that you told last week about the cost of trust.
Yes. So, Professor Jason Potts, who's from RMIT in Melbourne, he's done a study looking at the cost of trust. So when we look at, he says basically, trust is valuable, but it's very costly to maintain. So I looked at white-collar jobs in the US, and 35% of those jobs were in the transaction to create trust. So these are auditors, accountants, middle management, contract managers, procurement managers, anyone who is there to facilitated transactions. So it's costing us trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars every year just to have humans sitting in the transaction to facilitate trust. So blockchain can turn that into a technological, I guess, solution. Therefore, removing those intermediaries out of the transaction, creating savings, but also at the same time generating new data that creates opportunities for innovation and new jobs.
So I've got another one where AI can help blockchain as well. So I talked a little bit earlier about natural language processing being one of the most commonly used artificial intelligence technologies that's around today. So blockchain has a challenge in that smart contracts are written by humans, right? So they're written by humans in a little development environment, and where blockchain actually gets to be really interesting is when you can have those business rules written by business people, right? Because effectively a smart contract is just an instantiation of a business rule. If this, then that. There's a company around who is starting to look at using natural language processing to simplify the writing of smart contracts. And where this gets interesting is a couple of months ago we had Shamian from the Cold Legal who came. And she was talking about the work that they do, the legal work that they do, and where she sees blockchain going, and which parts of the legal process could potentially be disrupted by blockchain, and there will be some. But the challenge that they've got is that the legal people don't necessarily understand the technology, and the technologists don't understand the law, right? And so this is where natural language processing can actually help to at least get the rough smart contract out. You're always going to need your technical people to go through, make sure it's secure, do all of your testing, all of that sort of stuff. But it can help with the efficiency around blockchain because there's a shortage of blockchain developers.
So that's, I'd like to acknowledge Professor John Flood in the audience, who has been doing an enormous amount of work for the last few years around bringing those two conversations together, which seems to be polar opposite.
Yeah.
But the idea of bringing law and technology into the conversation in our education systems around Australia, which is very important because one of the impediments to adoption is the lack of devs in this country, lack of good devs as well, because if you write a smart contract that is wrong, the implications are significant. Like, I think there was one ICO that forgot to put the word, I think, exit or take out of the smart contract to take the funds. So got a perpetual lock that you couldn't actually pull the money out of the raise because the command wasn't there. So there's a lot of work going on around the idea of how do you actually then audit smart contracts to ensure that you're looking for exceptions, to ensure that nothing is nefarious in the contract. Where you are right, I think we talked about ethics, and ethics is quite critical. The governance, the business rules. So when we do our jobs, I mean, it's not until we've actually laid all that out that we start writing code. You know, what is the governance? What is the business rules? And that is not technically driven. It's about what is the problem you're solving and who you're solving the problem for. And that is where, I guess, where our two worlds intersect, is because our smart contracts can put if this then that on AI to give them the triggers or the conditions to which that they can actually make decisions.
So Tracey.
So it can't take over the world.
That's right. So it can't take over the world. So we don't have dystopia.
So we could actually have like self-executing smart contracts that control models.
Exactly.
So Tracey, then blockchain could really be playing a role in auditing AI.
Yes, it could. Absolutely, it could. So we did mention earlier before the garbage in, garbage out. So you've got one way to get a lot of extra data in, which we're starting to see a lot more now, is the concept of IoT. So everyone with their smartphones and smart devices, you're collecting data, whether you know it or not, everywhere you go, everything you do. So there's a lot of data that's coming in. And one of the you want to make sure that the data, when it's coming in, is valid data, right? So particularly if it's the start or a trigger of a business process, or if you know that you're going to be using it at some point down the track. And where we're seeing a lot of blockchain initiatives now is around the supply chain. So things like, I want to make sure that that chicken is organic. I want to make sure that that wool that I bought from Australia is actually Australian wool by the time it gets through. So helping to trace things along the blockchain. And so the IoT is a way of actually validating along the path, things like temperature, things like physical location or origin. So you can combine that with blockchain. I'm going on a bit of a tangent here. Yeah, okay. You can combine, you can use blockchain to validate the IoT data, and you can use IoT to validate the blockchain data. So there's like an interoperability in there. So then you're getting good data into your business processes, you're getting good data into your models.
Yeah, and because we work with government, we're about creating open government for the future, not just open data, because governments can talk about open data, but where is it coming from? What values are it creating? And working in the area of water, that is a very contentious area because there has been claims of people taking more than their fair share. So how does Internet of Things then actually create that control mechanism of who's taking what? And that's where our technologies come into play.
Yep. Okay, I'm just conscious of the time. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask one more quick question of the panel and then throw it open to questions. Because I know that we want to have a little bit of a session, the second half, doing a retro of women in blockchain and getting your input for how we proceed next year. So the final question is along the themes of mainstream adoption. And I just, with all emerging technologies, obviously by their nature they take time, they have lead up time, there's a lot of infrastructure and standards that need to be built out. The AI and the blockchain scene are fairly heavily dominated by startups. And it can be a bit of a view that startups are just ping pong playing geeks. So
Who says that?
shouldn't we just wait until like the banks and the lawyers and the big multinational companies and the government and all those authorities that we can trust, shouldn't we wait till they adopt the technology?
I think she's beating it.
She won't answer.
Yeah. I reckon she might be.
It's like a really loaded question. Do you want to?
One of the things that I had to do the Tech 23 pitch a few weeks ago in Sydney.
Yes, congratulations for that.
No, I was because Civic Ledger was identified as one of the top 23 innovative companies in Australia. So I had to go down to Sydney and do a pitch. And I did not know this because I'm so green to this. But this was the 10th year that the Tech 23 had happened, and I did not know, but us as startups were just the side gig. We were just there as the entertainment, because everyone else who was in the audience were VCs and investors who used this particular event in entertainment. So here I am at this is 23 companies and I'm number 20. And I had Monica Bradley in the audience, thank goodness, because she was championing me on. But I sort of was sitting there and observing everything, and I said, bloody hell, I'm not doing that. I'm not actually going to do the normal, this is who we are, and this is the problem we're solving, and this is why, blah, 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 that I listened to 19 companies before me talk about. So I ditched my pitch, and I spoke from my heart. And one of the things that I said was, I put my ask first, and I was the only one in the room in that day that I asked. And I said, I wanted a purchase order. And everyone went, ooh. And I said, I'm going to tell you the reason why I want a purchase order. And I said, because we have a problem with the lack of developers in this country. And the only way that we as a company, as a startup, can actually scale and employ and teach is through contracts. We can't do this through investment alone. Investing is awesome, it's great for your runways, but at the end of the day for startups, you need validation from customers. You need validation from government and enterprise and industry who are going to reach in and actually contract with you to deliver stuff. Now, I know that the Queensland government is sitting, going to put $4 million into AI. $4 million. How much is Canada putting in, Tracey?
Oh, it's over 120 million, I think.
120 million.
Yeah.
Right. So we have this really important technology. 4 million.
It's to start it. Yeah. So that's the AI Hub, which, like, to be fair, it's a great initiative. That there's a focus on technology and developing technology. It is.
It's silent to like all the emerging technology because this is important altogether.
It is. I 100% agree with you. I think it's really important. Yeah.
We are going to have an enormous 2019, and it's all because we got government as the first customer.
Absolutely, and it's about where do you go from there. And I really love your point about I want a purchase order. So
it's scared everyone.
Very nice.
It's like then Monica talked to me. She pulled me over the side of the after. She goes, "Katrina, you need to chill out because you're a really scary bitch now."
This is what happens when you feed us champagne at lunchtime. So I was going to bring it back and actually and answer your question, or put a different layer on the question.
It up and then I'll throw out to the audience.
Sure, okay. So your question, how I interpreted it, was why don't we wait for enterprise to adopt these technologies? I think enterprise comes like they are the incumbents. They've got a legacy of technology, right? Most enterprises that I'm aware of are currently investing very heavily in just maintaining what they've got. They'll talk about innovation, but they're not optimized for actually innovating. And that's where enterprises working with startups is a great opportunity for enterprises to bring some of that innovation thinking into their organisations, but they just can't move fast enough. So the technology, there are people who are passionate about it, who are out there starting companies to build these solutions. You're not going to stop that. And as consumers, you actually want that, right? You want to challenge the way things are working. The modern ways of architecting solutions are so much more secure than the old ways of doing things as well. So it's going to be more secure, more responsive. Like, these are good things to be happening.
So then I'm going to ask a question for you, Tracey. What is your expectations for the new AI Hub?
What I would like to see is a place where startups can go and they can co-create, where businesses will come in and they will say, you know what, I've got a problem that I need to solve and I don't know how to solve it. And they will know where they can go to talk to startups, to talk to other companies, and they can help to co-create that. I'd also like to see training and awareness so that normal everyday people and businesses can start to engage in the conversation about these technologies, because by doing that, they'll be able to influence in the direction the technologies go in, and you won't leave it up to us geeks who will just build Star Trek.
Does anybody in the audience have any questions for these ladies? Joe, could you pass Katrina's mic around?
I think her hand went up a little.
Oh no, it's like really cute.
That's okay.
Sorry, I'm super excited. Sorry. I deal with clients who are kind of dancing around the edge of AI and blockchain, and they're sort of still in their fear space but getting curious. And you mentioned, I think, Tracey, that there's a lack of really good devs. How do you know what's good and bad? Because it's such a terrible and costly experience.
It is. We've got a trick.
We have a trick to that, and that is when you are looking at a company or a dev, ask them to show them their GitHub.
Yeah.
This is something that coders understand.
Yeah.
You got to look at their GitHub, and also you set them a task, and then have it peer reviewed. Don't look at their CV, don't look at their claims or their attestations, look at them, what they do in the community. Are they hungry? Are they involved with meetups? What are they doing to the community in terms of learning? And this technology is about open source, so they need to be seen as open source.
That's actually, that highlights a really interesting point that we didn't touch on. Blockchain is very decentralized and very open source. AI, because of the nature of it, because it's all about data, is very centralized and it's very closed and very controlled. Like, they're opposite ends of the spectrum. There is more of an open source movement starting to happen with AI, but just because of the sheer volume of data that you need to do it effectively, it's ended up in these sort of silos of like large technology companies.
Yeah.
So open source is awesome.
Who was the lady that had her hand up first and got dudded?
So I want to preface this question by saying that one of the people in Brisbane who's very big into the crypto space is a very, very good friend of mine. And because of him, I am aware of a lot of there's no other way of saying this, engineering wankery that happens around cryptocurrencies.
Well done.
And as an engineer myself, I've been wondering if this engineer infight about bits and bytes and about stacks and highways and block sizes, if all of that.
Block size is bigger than your block size.
Well, yeah, one of my good friends was actually in the Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin Brisbane debate. I'm sure people in the know what I'm talking about.
Yes, we do.
And so what I want to know is this really public infighting among engineers over technical terms, is it actually damaging the growth of blockchains? Because it's just...
I think that the impact that it has is it creates confusion. So in any technology, you're always going to have people who are like, well, look, I prefer JavaScript over Ruby on Rails. Like, you're always going to have these technical discussions about what's the better technology. You know, beta and VHS, yeah, exactly. One will win out, right? But the effect that it has is that it confuses the general public. So if you're someone who's just wandering in and you're like, oh, I want to learn more about this technology, I'm going to go and have a look at, you know, what's happening. You're getting these really, really mixed messages. So I guess it'll make the community stronger, and the community is very open-minded, I've got to say. Like, people are very, they will listen to these debates and they will engage intelligently in these debates, but I think where it really hurts the community is in terms of the broader adoption of the technology.
How do we fix that?
I'd like to see that we have a little bit of self-regulation, that we actually call it out when it's getting outrageous. And I know that our Telegram group is now forked because of what was going on. Because of what was going on between BTC and Bitcoin Cash, it was just getting ridiculous. So every time it gets to that point, we sort of self-regulate, we do a bit of a fork and regroup and get back to what is real.
Say hypothetically we've got some fantastic, wonderful brains around in Australia, and we hypothetically create this kind of artificial intelligence and sitting on top of blockchain, where we throw open the old models of innovation towards open innovation, and we ask people to go into public-private blockchains without in a matrix, and we actually really asking them to open up their data silos, but safely. How ready do you think the government would be for that?
I think it depends on the problem, again, that is being solved. Why we choose to, we as a company have a value proposition that we will consider public and permissionless blockchains first. And the reason why we do that is because of its open source nature. And secondly, why we do that is because we would like ecosystems to be fostered based on the data that we secure through this technology. So if we were to look at one of the, it depends on the problem you're solving. And for example, most of the problems that we solve are around public registries. So when it's in the public interest, and it's legislated to be in the public interest, then we know that we can comfortably have those conversations with government around public blockchains for the various reasons that we understand. The other thing too is that we don't propose the problem as it currently stands. So when we look at the problem statement, we actually look for a perspective of the future. What will the problem look like in the future and how are we going to build for the future? Some governments are very responsive to that, particularly the Australian government. A bit different in various other governments because as we find it's a little bit overwhelming for bureaucrats because all of a sudden they fear that their data is going to be unregulated. But the challenge, the thing is actually they get oversight. For the first time, they get oversight of where their data goes. So it's a governance shift, it's a cultural change shift, it's a mind shift. And that's why it requires leadership. I don't think, I just feel that, again, like with cloud computing, when that came on board, the amount of change that we had to go through just to get cloud computing happening, we're actually going through that again. And I think it's just about people feeling comfortable with data. But what blockchain does is that it actually redefines our relationship with data. And that's the biggest challenge, because now we're going to have to think about it, we have to structure it, we have to define it, we have to govern it.
And that is completely different.
Yep.
Okay, I'm conscious of our time because we still want to do a second part of the session. Two more questions and then we'll have to move on.
Hi, I have a question for both of you, if you like. Tracey, you said before that you were concerned about seeing more training and awareness brought into the AI space, so it's not coming from us geeks. And I know that's definitely happening in the blockchain space as well. How has that currently been facilitated by you both, or how have you observed that happening in the design process so far?
What my company does is primarily educational. We deliver solutions using AI and ML, but there's a really big component of actual uplift and demystification and teaching people to fish along the way, which is just very much our company culture. And we do run, we voluntarily run user groups as well. And the same with Civic Ledger, with you with Civic Ledger, I'm running the blockchain and Bitcoin blockchain, yep. So getting out there, being part of the community and actually contributing to that, I think it needs to happen more broadly though. So it's like we can all do our part, but we are reaching the people who are already engaged in the process or thinking about being engaged in the process. When you have a look at how pervasive these technologies are being and how truly transformational they can be, there are plenty of people who maybe don't feel like they can engage in that conversation. Like they just think I'm not technical, or I wouldn't have a clue where to start. And I think that's where we need to look at next.
Tracey's right. We both as companies do, most of our work that we do is around education in the first instance. And we both have different roles. Like I'm on the Australian Digital Commerce Association, which does policy. We've got the Parliamentary Friends of Blockchain occurring in Canberra on the 3rd of December. So all of us are actually lifting up as much as we can. But it's when we co-design, because we co-design our blockchain solutions, we make sure that people who are necessary in the room are in the room. So we're actually extending that education beyond through the organisations. But what we make very clear when we co-design is to say, to sustain this in your organisation, you have to rethink your jobs. You have to think about what positions you're going to need to be bringing into the organisation to sustain this type of technology. Because it's not just here and now, it's actually for the future. And we actually do a lot of work around that as well. And it's in the co-design work, so design thinking, as you say.
Okay, I'll take one last question for the gentleman in the second row.
So let me, 3 months ago, I'm in London for a startup catalyst trip. And in one afternoon, at lunchtime, we do a wander through rocket ship, co-working space, and there's a seating for 1,000 people in startups. In the afternoon, we go up 2 floors, and it's a NatWest Bank presentation about their accelerator space. And they've got 18 of them around the UK, 1,000 people in startups, or 1,000 seats for startups. The very next morning we go out to Plexel, which is where the Olympics was at, and there's 3 different groups there. There's 2 universities, there's industry, and there's about 1,000 people in startups.
Yep.
So my greatest challenge that I think is happening is the level of competition around applying new tech to business opportunities and getting it deployed, and that I come back here and I go, now just to give you one thing, the Plexel place, the guys that pull that together, it's a private grouping, but the lease they've got is from the government. They pay £0 for the lease, and it's a 2-year lease.
Yes.
Getting value, but we're not even on the same planet competitively. Now, my real question is, we've got problems, but I'm not interested in trying to work out what our problems are or where they come from. I think that's just too complicated. I'm much more interested in your thoughts about what are the right actions that we should be taking so that we have a chance to be competitive in this world.
I think we've got to lose our backyard barbecue mentality. I think we have to stop sitting around in these co-founding facilities, which are awesome, and think that this is just about being gratitude. This is about market making. And these are the things that we've been talking about for years, because I've been here for 2 years. We're just about to exit our co-working facility here. And every day I walk in here and go, where are the market making? Where's the hunger? Where's the competition? Why is Brisbane, Queensland still sitting around having a barbecue? And that's how we're perceived around the rest of Australia, because I know on these 4 levels, the talent that is here, 5 companies in this building alone won Finney Awards, which is the most prestigious industry acknowledgements Australia-wide, and nobody was interested in our stories. Nobody. We had to get a journalist from Sydney to come and interview us, and the text didn't, and it didn't even get published. I think we've got to stop being so, should we write? It's okay, we'll be fine. We've got to start getting hungry, competitive, and start leaning in. And it's not a case, and I know it's awesome that the Queensland government are putting $4 million down for AI, but that's not bloody good enough. It really, seriously, is not bloody good enough. And I think we've all got to just, I know Marie, and I just want to personally acknowledge Marie Bear, who's sitting in front of me, because Marie Bear got the fire in her belly, and she persisted, with Kate Jones because of what was going on around female founders and the Ignite funds and all that sort of stuff. And she was so pissed off that she pursued the PLO over and the policy liaison officers or chief of staff over and over again until the fact that there was a forum put together to address why there were no female founders or founders who were getting Ignite grants. And as much disappointment is that, Marie, you were not included in that conversation, even though it was your leadership that got Ignite who actually took that conversation forward. So what we're seeing in this room is that individually we're all agitated, but I think collectively we have to pull together, because Queensland is extraordinary, but we're just not doing our best here. We're just sailing through because it's the Queensland way, and it's not good enough. I've been asked so many times to apply for a Queensland award, you know, women in blockchain or women in technology, blah, blah, blah. I refuse to, because Civic Ledger has not had a contract in Queensland. We can't get a purchase order here. We are Australia's emerging fintech organisation of 2018 and cannot get any engagement in Queensland in this technology. So I'm like going, well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to participate in anything until we get some acknowledgement of the hard work we do. We employ 5 people now, and we're growing to 10, and then we're going to grow to 30, and then we're going to grow to 100. What will it take before we get acknowledgement of the work that all these founders do in this state. We don't quit our jobs because we want to have an easy life. We quit our jobs because we want to make a difference. And that's the thing that just doesn't get sunk into this place. So I get really, really quite agitated over these questions.
Could I get a round of applause, please? Katrina.
Oh, could I just make one comment to that?
Thank you, Katrina, for your comment to me. But because I also am quite determined, I would also like to make the comment that it's not just Queensland that we should be going for. And my company is an example of this. We're obviously going, trying to provide a product for the Australian market. But in all our thinking, and if we are very innovative, we should be going for the global market. That's the way we should be going, and we should be getting acknowledged for that.
Thanks, Murray. Thank you. A big round of applause for and all the other women co-founders in the room. For those of you that have to rush off, have to go back to your office job, please feel free to do so. But for those that can stay, please get another drink, have some pizza, and we're going to do a little bit of a retrospective session for the next 15 minutes.
So have you already given me your top 3 then? What you'd like to see out of Queensland next year? Or you know that?